So this forum marks the 40th anniversary of the discovery of Mungo Man, which along with Munanjahli is some of the oldest remains of modern humans outside of Africa. Now this was a landmark discovery that challenged, I guess, what Western science knew about Aboriginal people's relationship to this country. It challenged what we thought we knew. But it also causes us to consider a deeper conversation about how Aboriginal ancestral remains are used, collected, and also the issue of repatriation of Indigenous remains. So we're very privileged to have Professor Steve Webb launch the conversation tonight with and tell us a bit more about that discovery and his important work in this area, as well as Leonie and Dale talking with us around Indigenous activism and agency around returning ancestral remains back to country. Before I actually tell you more about our panellists, I have a few housekeeping things that I just have to get through, so bear with me. You may have noticed the lovely Joanne Dreesen's taking photos, which she's doing right now. If you feel really uncomfortable about having a photo taken, can you please just tap Jo on the shoulder and let her know sometime throughout the evening? In the event of emergency, one of the lovely kuril dhagun staff will take over and guide us out of the building somewhere. Amanda, that will be you. Thank you. Should you need to use the facilities, I am assured that they're out the main door and across the hall. That would be correct. Yeah. If you need to use them at any point during this forum, please feel free to step out. We will not take it personally. In terms of some more serious housekeeping, I just need to warn you that Professor Webb's presentation tonight does feature images of ancestral remains. Should you feel uncomfortable viewing those, please feel free to exit the auditorium at any point, and one of our kuril dhagun staff will advise you when it's okay to come back in if that's okay. So the format we have tonight is we have Professor Webb giving us a half-hour presentation on his important work, and we'll have a bit of a yarn about what that means for us in our respective areas. And we'll invite you to join in the conversation. Now I know these public forums can make us all feel a bit nervous, so please feel free to engage in the yarn with us tonight. This is a really privileged opportunity we have to have an intimate audience with these mob up here. So I encourage you to take advantage of the opportunity. Some of you have been here at the conversations before with Leonie and with Dale, and I'm sure you have more questions to ask of them, which they'd be happy to answer. At the end of today's forum, we will have Jenny perform a smoking ceremony for us outside in the foyer. Please be mindful, if you do not wish to participate in that, that is fine, but you're more than welcome to join us in that at the end.
Now look, I've got unattended Mike here, and I'd like to add, please ask questions because we all have assumptions, and until you challenge those assumptions, you don't learn. And I think life's about learning, isn't it? And challenges those assumptions that we all have. Because remember one time they thought the earth was flat, and we certainly know it's not.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm just going to do a quick bio of each of our panellists, tell you a bit more about them for those of you who don't know them. I should point out that unfortunately Uncle Bob Weatherall could not make it tonight, but I understand his Night by the Fire conversation was recorded and it is available online for those of you who missed it. So I'd encourage you to check that out.
Unless you called him Uncle Bob.
Sorry?
Unless you called him Uncle Bob.
Don't tell him.
Not his face.
So let me first introduce you to the awesome Dr. Dale Kerwin.
Yeah, witch doctor, thank you.
Dr. Kerwin is a proud Koori Aboriginal man from the Worimi Nation, New South Wales. He has been awarded, wait for it, a Diploma of Primary Teaching, a Graduate Diploma of Museum Studies and Cultural Heritage Management, a Masters of Philosophy, and a PhD for his study of Aboriginal trading paths. And his thesis is titled Aboriginal Dreaming Tracks or Trading Paths, The Common Ways. Dr. Kerwin's academic career has been driven by the need for a proper conversation between the coloniser's history and the first Australians' history. He remains committed to furthering knowledge about Aboriginal cultural heritage.
Witch doctor.
Thank you. Then we have the lovely Leonie Coghill, who is a Gurrumpool traditional owner of Quandamooka, Moreton Bay, Leonie has worked at the Queensland Museum for the past 8 years as the Manager of Repatriation and Community Engagement. Leonie is the repatriation unit at the Queensland Museum. And this unit involves providencing, what does providencing mean?
Finding out where remains come from.
And the returning of ancestral remains, associated burial goods and secret sacred objects collected by the Queensland Museum during the past 150 years to their community of origin. Thank you, Leonie, for joining us.
Thank you.
And lastly, let me introduce Professor Steve Webb, who has received his BA in Honours and PhD degrees from the Australian National University in Canberra. He was appointed lecturer there in 1984 and Research Fellow in the Research School of Pacific Studies in 1986, where he conducted extensive research on the oldest human remains in Australia from Lake Mungo and Munanjahli lakes. His work and experience has been featured by Time magazine and national and international news media, as well as in National Geographic, Discovery, BBC, ABC and Tokyo Broadcasting documentaries. He has given guest lectures around Australia and in Europe and in North and South America, and now here in Brisbane, State Library of Queensland. I will not go on. I'll invite Steve to share with us. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chelsea. Thanks, everybody. And thank you for coming along to this talk. I've been told I've got half an hour, and I actually prepared something for about an hour. So we've got a bit of moving to do. That's Australia, and down there, or up there, is the oldest archaeological site in Australia, 60,000 years old, Munanjahli, and down here we've got the Willandra Lakes, and that is where Lake Mungo is, western New South Wales. If you take a satellite picture of this, the Willandra Lakes, there they are, like a bunch of pearls on a chain. And in the last ice age, they used to fill up with water from a small glacier that formed on the snowy mountains. They used to fill up and they used to empty as well. And then they fill up again, and then they empty again. And the one we're going to concentrate on tonight is this one, with the red ring around it. That's Lake Mungo. Lake Mungo has become the sort of famous lake out there. In fact, it's one of the smallest. As you can see, there's one next to it, which is much, much bigger. There's about 5 main lakes, and there's about 8 other small lakes as well. In the past, in the very distant past, a long time ago, 30 to 40 to 50,000 years ago, people used to live around those lakes. And as the lake emptied and filled, so there was sediment built up on one side of the lake. And you can see it there in this sort of sliver of moon shape. That's why it's called a lunette. So it's a sand dune, but it's got this special name, lunette. And the actual lake itself is there, it's dry. It's been dry for 14,000 years. Now, what I'll go on to the next one, I don't know. Yeah, okay, it was on one end of this lake that in 1969, the Mungo lady was found. And she was, pressing the wrong buttons. She was found there, on this end. And later on in 1974, 40 years ago, the man, WH3 as it's called, Willandra Lakes Human 3, was found just about half a kilometre from the lady. And I want to look at these two people tonight, and this is what I want to explain to you about, something about what these people said to us. And why I say that is because these people have talked to us in a way, and this was first broached to me by an old elder out there about 30 years ago. And she said, you know, these remains have come back to us to talk to us, and they're going to teach us something. And that's what we've got to know, because we've lost so much. So, as I say, tonight I'm going to show you some of that. I was going to go into how the stratigraphy is and the layers and all the rest of it. But I'm not going to do that now because of my time constraint. But there's a nice picture down on the lunette. And there's another nice picture, what it is to me. That red, we know very little about that particular settlement because we think it goes back to 120,000 years ago, which is much, much longer than the remains that we found at the moment. Now, if you walk along this lunette, what it's done in the past is build up these sediments. And when people lived there, these sediments locked them up, locked them inside. So they're like a time capsule. And then, later, about 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, this lunette started to disintegrate, started to erode away. And as the sediments blew away, so the tract, if you like, history of this place started to come out. And it included material culture, food scraps, hearts and humans. Now, you can walk on that surface today out there, that's what it is like today, and you can see for yourself, you can actually find hearts and pieces of remains that have come from that time, 30,000, 40,000 years ago. Now, I feel a bit claustrophobic here because I like to march up and down. I do that when I'm lecturing. But what also came to us about 10 years ago, getting on for 10 years ago now, was a set of footprints. It wasn't on Lake Mungo, they were on another lake. And in fact, it was between lakes. And this set of footprints came out, and to me, and I've worked on the human remains before, and of course to me, I've always said, well, the human remains are humans. You can have stone tools there, and you can have shell, and you can have the remains of fish, and all the rest of it, which you do find. But it's not the humans. The bones are actually the people. There, you can actually find the flesh, which is on the bones. Well, the flesh is gone, but it's the imprint of people walking about. Adults, children, men running, all sorts of things. So this site became very special. There's a picture just taken just after dawn. It's quite cool, in fact. And there's a child's footprint from 20,000 years ago. All these prints are from 20,000 years ago. Height of the last ice age. This country then was joined to PNG. It was joined, we were also joined Tasmania. You could walk from Dublin to the tip of South America without getting your feet wet because all those continents were joined. This was a different world, and these people were living in that world. So those footprints disappear under a sand dune over there, and to this day they're still buried down there. We also, this is some of the traditional owners from out there. In fact, there's a person from each of the three traditional tribal groups out there. Mati Mati, Barkindji and Nyemba people from right to left. And they're looking at this amazing mosaic of prints. And this particular print here is a print of a one-legged man. He's hopping from there to that footprint to that footprint. There's no left foot. How did he do it? We actually, and there's one of the prints, we actually brought in some experts, Pintabee people from Central Australia, and they helped us interpret that site because we couldn't properly. I mean, you can say that's a footprint, obvious. But they showed us where people had stood and had their spears sticking in the ground while they looked around, while a child had been doing squiggles in the mud, and all sorts of other prints and things. That's another story. I haven't got enough time for that tonight. Sorry. But without these people, the local people, this job wouldn't have been done. We were working together. And that was one of the things I've been talking about for nearly 30 years. And they've been talking about it too. We don't want white fellas to come out here, scientists, and take away our remains. We want to share it. We want to learn from it. And in the old days, that's what happened. White fellas go out, the scientists, They take what they wanted, take it back to a university or a museum, and you'd never see it again. All these people. They wanted partnership, and they fought for it. But now we can talk together, and we can organise things like the work on this site. As I say, without that work, without their help, we wouldn't have been able to do it. Now, as you walk along those surfaces out there on Lake Mungo, you can see that these are the fires I've been talking about. These are hearths, these small patches of charcoal. There's some teeth here somewhere in there, small animal bone fragments, part of a wombat tooth, and all sorts of bits. We've got the vertebra from fish, which you can then work out how big the fish were. So these fish here, or these fish vertebra, represents a fish 8.5 kilos, 18 pounds. This is what was being caught in those lakes. Also, these are being caught and dragged in as well. Shellfish, beautiful. Freshwater mussels. Pop a few on the fire, they open. You've got to have an oyster opener. This is the Pintabee people that came out to the site. And there's two there. So Johnny and Paddy, Johnny Jabananga, and this is an elder from the Barkindji people. And Johnny and Paddy whispered. They automatically knew this was a special site. And they said to one another, this is dreaming, this is dreaming. They knew it was old. And so they only whispered. And they only spoke Pintabee. We had somebody with us that could translate Pintabee. These old men didn't know any white fellas until they were 30. They lived out in there. They lived out in that country. Some of their ladies came along as well. Munanjahli here had 2 children in the bush before she'd ever seen a white fella. She's a great painter as well. But what was happening was not only we were sort of trying to get some information about the site using their amazing knowledge, but the local people and the Pintabee were coming together. They were making inroads into each other. They would get to know each other. Eventually, the Pintabee people, gave them a digging stick, which they used out in central Australia. They gave the ladies, the local ladies in Mungo, and there they are with us there. The thing I've got to say is this lass here is the one that actually found the prints originally. We call her Hawkeye. And she found 1 or 2 prints, and she shouted to me, she said, "Oh, is this a footprint?" And I looked at her and said, "It is a footprint." And at first, when we first saw them, we thought, are they really, isn't it, well, somebody was running around here with no shoes on, that's what it was. And they probably here last year or something. Anyway, that's what we found on the Willandra. Willandra is full of information, but we haven't done enough work out there. Now that's another story as well. This is a picture of the Mungo lady when she was first found. It's a huge carbonate nodule on the southern end of the Lake Mungo Lunet. And it was found by a geomorphologist, Jim Bowler, and he saw bone sticking out of it. And this is in, as you know, 1969. It might have been 68 when he first saw it, and he went back in 69. But anyway. What they did, basically, was to come out, well, he went back to the ANU where he was doing a PhD, and a couple of people came out with him, Alan Thorne and John Mulvaney. They had an old suitcase, and they picked it all up, put it in the suitcase, and took it back to the ANU. Then, Alan Thorne put this into mild acid, and he actually took away the calcium carbonate, and he left the bone. And then he put the bone together, and he made reconstructed the Mungo lady. The thing about the Mungo lady was that she was so gracile, she was so modern. She was about, up there, 151 centimetres, which is about 4'10". Very thin skull, very oval, no brow ridges, no muscle markings. It was described at the time as ultra-modern. When the first dates came back, she was 26,000 years old. She was later redated and it became 42,000 years old. This is some of her leg bones, the tibia. But the amazing thing about this discovery was that she had been partially burnt, and then she'd been taken out of the fire. The bones were then broken up. The fire then opened up. The bones put in, and then the fire put her back over the top of her, and she was left. And that's how she became fixed in that lump of calcium carbonate. She'd gone through a ritual. She'd gone through a ritual cremation. They'd done it deliberately. I'll come back to it. This is the Mungo Man, 1974. This is when they were excavating the Mungo Man. Different type of burial. It wasn't a cremation. The bones weren't all in one place. It was an extended burial, as we call it. He's about 5'10" on the old scale, 173 centimetres. The lady was in her mid-20s. This is a man of 45 to 55 years old. He's laid on his left side, his right side, and his hands in his lap. He was also originally he was dated at 32,000. He was redated at the same time that the Mungo lady was, and he was 42,000, the same as the lady. They've always been sort of put together as sort of almost like man and wife. Now, that's of course not the truth, but that's the way everybody saw it. With this date, they were buried very, very close together, around 42,000 years ago. He had the same sort of cranial shape as the lady. Light, gracile, oval, no brow ridges, and I've got more on here. And very few muscle markings. Now you might ask, why am I saying this? I mean, he's a modern person, so why am I talking about that? We haven't got those markings either. Okay. Just remember it for a while. But what we've got is two burials, half a kilometre apart. They were buried in different ways, in different practices, 42,000 years ago, on the end of the same brunette, over in Australia. Who are these people? That's the question. Who are these people? What do they really represent? Well, what they represent is a people that have complex burials and a complex cultural system. They've got a belief system. They believe they have to be buried in that way. If not, you just throw a body over the edge, let the animals in. But no, these people have to be looked after properly. And there's a ritual. There's a ritual in the smashing of the bones. There's a ritual in the fact that this skeleton was covered in red ochre. There's no red ochre in this area. You have to go 200 kilometres to get the ochre. Was it traded, or did they actually go and find it and bring it back? Because if they did that, that's a 400k walk. Either way, they had to have this ochre, and it had to be broken up and laid right along the body. What that meant, who knows? But what it does mean is that it's ritual. And it's ritual for him as cremation was ritual for her. If you've got ritual and cremation and ceremony going on, you've got to have a complex language. It's no good somebody saying language came along 20,000 years ago or whatever. These people had complex language. They had to have it. They would have had to have it anyway until they actually got into Australia, build boats to come in. But that's another story as well. When we got to the man, he told us other things about his culture. He had osteoarthritis in his right elbow. He had so much osteoarthritis on his radial head, the head of the radius, that's that bone there. If you twist your arm, leave your hand there, you can feel it turning. Well, as that was turning, it was wearing out over the period of his 45 to 50 years. And what that bone was turning on was another bone up there. This is the end of the humerus down there. And that's the line there, round there, that is causing, it is grinding on that bone. It's osteoarthritis. And what happens in osteoarthritis is you lose the articular cartilage in your knees, or your elbows, or your shoulders. We all do it. I've got it. A lot of people have got it. This man had it. And when you lose the articular cartilage, you get bone on bone grinding it together. And it ends up being pitted like that, and even sometimes you get it polished into ebonation, as they call it. It's a polishing, a shine. When you get bone on bone grinding together, they gradually break up. There's no cure for it. Well, there is now. You can have a new elbow, but then you couldn't. Why? Why did he have this? Fortunately, this syndrome, this is osteophytosis. It's just limping on the arm, which allows your arm to go like that. Fortunately, that group of conditions was studied in America a long time ago, and it was studied in Californian Indians. Californian Indians had a thing called an atlatl. It's a spear thrower. It's what we call a woomera. That's what the Mungo Man was using. He used it all his life. This actual spear throwing, the use of the spear thrower, causes huge forces on this elbow, or this one if you're left-handed. But he was right-handed. We know he was right-handed as well because this bone was a little bit bigger, only a little bit, but a little bit bigger than this one. And that's what happens in all of us. If you're right-handed, these bones are a little bit bigger than those. Or in my case, these are because I'm left-handed. So he was using spear throwing. So we've dated the woomera. When we looked at the teeth, when I looked at his teeth, you could see a couple of other things. One, there was a peculiar wear pattern. Oh, let me go back. Peculiar wear pattern on his tooth. See how that tooth is sloped down? You don't get teeth worn out like that. But you do if you tear vegetable fibre through your teeth over a lifetime. Perhaps to tease out the vegetable fibre to make nets to use in the lake. So he wouldn't leave necessarily net making to women. He was into it as well. The other thing that happened to this man, he had these two teeth missing. And they were taken out deliberately. They were avulsed. And tooth avulsion, of course, as a lot of people in England will know, is traditional amongst Aboriginal people. But this man, this is the oldest evidence for it in the world. He had these taken out when he was young. Why? How do we know? Well, we know because this part of the jaw and that part of the jaw are shrunk. It's what we call resorbed over a lifetime. Those teeth have been missing for his lifetime, probably since he was about 14 or 15. Those teeth also have lent in either side to compensate because the teeth are gone. The other thing is, these are canines. You don't lose canines unless you get a really bad smack in the jaw. But if you had a really bad smack in the jaw enough to take a canine out, you'd have taken his teeth out with it. You didn't. These are neatly taken out. Another ceremony, another ritual. Oh, if you magnify that tooth, the surface of that tooth, there are lines of it going down here. Those lines are the lines caused by phytolith scratches. They're pieces of silica on plants, and they make tram lines on the surface of the teeth, and that's just what he's got. And that goes from up here, from the higher part of the tooth to the lower part of the tooth. So that's how we know what he was doing. There are other people being found around the lakes, the Willandra Lakes, in similar condition. This is number 68. She's the same colour, different coloration. Blue, greys, whites. This is typical of high temperature burning. Today you can go out there and you can still find bone. There's another person coming out there. That one looks as though it's been burnt also, just by the coloration of bone. But we've got other people out there as well. People that don't really fit the picture. We've got people that are built absolutely different. Big, robust people. Robust people with brow ridges, thick cranial vaults, flat sloping fronts, and just really heavy looking individuals. If you take an x-ray of this particular individual, the cranial vault is very thick. At one place it's 21 millimetres thick, 2 centimetres. It's different. These people are different. Who are they? They're not brother and sister with the others. This is not brother to the Mungo lady. He's not brother to the Mungo man either. They are a different group of people. See how much what we call diploma is in the cranium. This is somebody from Africa, 135,000 years ago. He's got the same thick cranium. Now, we can't date this individual. There's all sorts of ways of trying to date this individual, but we can't. It just won't work. Still hasn't got any organics to date, and there's nothing else about it that can date it. So it's an enigma. We don't have a date for it, and we don't know really what it means. There are others that are built the same. 3 here, 3 thick cranial vaults. Totally different from the Mungo lady and Mungo man. The back there, under the cranium, there's big dents for muscles. The muscles are big on this individual. The others are built lightly, what we call gracile. These are built robust. Even their bones. The bones are very thick through the cortical bone. This is the return in 1992 of the remains of the Mungo lady. This is Alan Thorne. And this is Badger Bates from the Barkindji, Broken Hill. He organised the Aboriginal side of things. And Alan organised the boxing up with a specially made box of the Mungo lady. He offered it back to the people in Western New South Wales. They were saying they would like it, but they didn't really protest about it. But he said, I think it should go back. And they really appreciated that. They thought that was a great piece of a great gesture on his part. And Badger got up, and this is at Mungo itself, because the remains are actually going back to the site, or at least for a little while. Badger got up on the stool there. This is the old shearing shed of Mungo. The Mungo itself was a station, sheep station. And all the people gathered round, about 280 people. Mostly black fellas, but white fellas as well. And he said to them, look, she's come back. They never put her on display. She was always kept under lock and key. Nobody sort of interfered with her as such. Just the science was carried out. And now she's come back to us. And that was really something really great spirit. The elders of the area were given chairs, and they all sat out on the site where Mungo lady was found originally. There was a few ABC people there, over there. Nobody else could go on there except the elders and Alan, who had the box in his hand. And he told them, he said, look, this has not been on display, we've treated her with all the respect she deserves, and she's coming back to you. And this is the picture I took of the people lined up watching. And you could hear a pin drop into the sand. Even the children didn't make any sound. It was just just the sound of the wind in the tobacco bushes. They just couldn't believe that their lady had come back to it. Because they see her, or at least the three traditional tribal groups, see her as the mother of three groups. So they all owned her in that way. But there were people from all sorts of groups right across Victoria, New South Wales, and there was even someone there from Tasmanian Aboriginal person, Darryl West. And I just, as I say, I was on one end, and then I just went round the back and went to the other end and just took these photos. Afterwards, there's Darryl there, Darryl West. Afterwards, people gave speeches and they got the elders got them under shade because it was about 42 degrees. And they had these shades off the lunette one end. People gave speeches and talked. It was a great feeling. It's the first time remains had gone back, and these were really important remains. The scientific value of fossil remains is infinite, but we might just talk about that in a minute, if you like. I might just end it there. But this is one of the, to me, well, because I would be biased. This is the value of these remains. But it's not just the value of these remains to me, but it's the value of the remains to young people that are coming along, Aboriginal people particularly, that will want to look at their own history. They will want to study it. When I first was involved in the repatriation or the burial issues, it was called then, back about 83, there was almost no Aboriginal people in universities. There was a few, not many. But now there are. And there are people in archaeology and anthropology, and they now want to see these remains. They want to work on these remains. They will want to see their story. They don't want my story. It's a whitefellow story. They want to check it out, make sure that it's the same story, or it's not the same story. It's their story. But they want the opportunity for it. And if we lock them away, these fossil remains, and this is obviously going to be a talking point, but if we lock them away, we can't advance the story of this continent, which is so old, it could be much older. Okay, thanks very much.
Fantastic, thank you. And thank you for squeezing that really long story into the time we have. I really appreciate it. So look, we might have a bit of a yarn about Steve's presentation, and I guess I'm quite happy if those in the audience, we're a small audience, if you have a burning question after having listened to that, we might just mix it up if you want to join in the conversation at any point. We do have a mic, we have mics, yeah? So I'm wondering, Dale and Leonie, what were your reflections on Steve's presentation? What did it make? What did you think?
No, not really. Know the story, I heard it, and honestly, we get tired of being told how to suck eggs. I apologise, and you've worked with us a long time, you understand where we come from. However, this has been done over and over and over again. We actually ask the rights to be able to do it ourselves, as you said, and we constantly, and I can understand why Bob's not here, and we honestly keep having it done to us. We've come to a point in time in our history where we ask and we're demanding that we tell our stories, and these remains as well, they're sacred remains, they need to be buried and not constantly being studied and being told you've got scarring on these things and these are happening. We know these stories, and our young need to learn from us. Constantly we go to university, we hear it from non-Indigenous people all the time, and I think we're at a point here in Australia that we need to move on, and it needs to embrace what we've got to say about our remains and our people and our culture. Those stories, we tell it. I've had my elders tell me the stories, and they actually tell the history of Australia.
Thanks, Simon. What are your thoughts?
I work a lot with Steve on repatriation. He's taught me a lot about the remains, sorting out who's who in the boxes that we had to send back. I'm very grateful for what he does with us. The last one fine example is before we send ancestors back, we like to try and restore their individuality and their gender status in some way, which Steve helps us with. And in one repatriation, the register said we were sending back 17 individuals, and at the end of the count, there were actually 41. The remains of 41 individuals that needed to be acknowledged, and so that's part of the work that we do. That's people are helping us to understand and learn about. I think we disagree on the scientific merit of remains, but I believe ancestors should be buried. I understand they have been treated with respect. I'm very respectful of Professor Thorne, who's since passed away. I guess people want to understand how long this country's been here. Personally, I don't care. We've been here a long time. The dreaming, we've been here since creation, we'll always be here. And the dreaming hasn't ended. We're now incorporating everyone else into that. I'd just like to see ancestors go home.
Are there ever any circumstances where ancestors might not be able to go home, or is there ever any circumstance where it's acceptable to retain ancestral remains or items?
Well, that's where communities have to get together and discuss things. We do have remains that are unprovenanced. We might just have a leg bone that nobody knows where it came from. Communities have to talk about that. I have revised my opinion on some things. Steve was examining remains for us last year, 2013, and came across a disease in the bones that, since the introduction of antibiotics, we've never seen. So I thought that was interesting, and I still think ancestors have to be buried, but I thought if there was something that we could learn, then possibly with the permission of the communities and the descendants of those ancestors, there might be some scientific merit. I'm still struggling with that.
I mean, I'm curious. I think with the findings about Mungo Man and Mungo Lady, and some Western scientific evidence that backs up the oral narrative that Indigenous people have asserted around us being from this country. I'm curious about, that potentially that science can help evidence the oral narrative, but do we need it? Or
Look, there's a whole counter argument. We hear these stories that there was this land bridge that people come. We've had the Genome Project. We've gone taken samples of everybody around the country, and they say, well, this is where people come. We have this whole idea of Gondwana land, and yet we've got emo that swims around an ocean. Emo? It's that fish, that
Nemo?
It follows the great currents. The whales follow the great currents. And Theodore Hydra did, to prove some sort of theories on how Polynesians and Melanesians colonised the world. And yet we have dreaming stories, oral histories of these boats landing here. And constantly we hear these theories that people come to Australia. And, I find it interesting, one of the brothers, Shane, he says to me, what, did we forget how to build boats again? Again, we say we've been here all the time. We know biologically, that our colour breaks down and the whole bit. And so we constantly also put up this other counter-argument that we've colonised the world. And there's been a lot of work done by anthropologists, and paleontologists, and the whole works to prove all these other counter-arguments. And so we've got this, a lot of other debates, and yet, again, we come to here in Australia, why aren't there more archaeologists doing work here? You know, our guys tend to go overseas and try and work further afield.
One of the reasons for that is, of course, they're frightened of the Aboriginal community. And they have been for years. Because they haven't been allowed to work here.
Well,
Nobody wants them to do it because you say you've already got all the knowledge. So they say, okay, we'll go somewhere else and do it.
Well, again, there's counter-arguments to it. Mining lets it happen, and we've seen so much destruction. And we've also seen our mob haven't been trained up, even though we understand our own things, but they walk country just to give it away. You know, so there's all these other counter-arguments why.
Yeah, you've had a lot of experience working with Aboriginal communities. How did you navigate through or overcome the distrust or resentment towards, Western research on ancestral remains in the communities which you worked in, and how did you navigate that?
Well, I went back, I talked to them a lot. First of all, I just went and sort of introduced myself and said, this is what I was and this is what I was doing. And I did a program in the 80s, called Community Liaison Program, to actually go out and say, let me just go back a minute. There were claims that there were hundreds of thousands of remains in museums. Well, there wasn't. There never was. It was just a political stunt. There still isn't. There's not many out there now, because a lot of them have gone back. But then it was claimed, I think at one point it was claimed the ANU had 25,000 people. And the ANU would send out archaeologists to dig all these people up. I mean, these were tough. This was misinformation. But people didn't know because, they were just going on what other people were telling them. So I did this community liaison, and the program it wasn't a sort of an official program or anything, but I went out because I thought that the relations between anthropologists and archaeologists and Aboriginal communities was at an all-time low. It was at that time. And I wanted to go out and just talk in their communities to them about what we do. Now they could say, and they did occasionally, go away, we don't want to know. Other times they said, all right, we'll sit down and talk to us and tell us. And then we'll tell you what we think. And they told me what they thought as well, sometimes. It was quite heated, to say the least. Because I was telling them about remains that were in museums and so on, and what we did. One old lady said to me, what do you do with them? You took our land, you took this, you gave us diseases, you took our women. Now you want our bones? Well, where you going? And with arguments like that, it was very difficult. It was very difficult to sort of come back and be logical or scientific or anything like that. So you just talk and talk and talk, and that's what I did for months on end with various people, right down the Murray and into other people and into other communities. And as I say, sometimes they're very good, and I was actually surprised how nice they were. And other times, well, they were a bit angry. But one of the things that came across to me was, you blokes come out, you get what you want, and you go away, you don't come back and tell us anything. And I said, I'm coming back, and that's what I used to do. I used to go back until I thought they're going to see me.
We call it bureaucrats from the sky. There's a whole theory about white goods from the sky. We have bureaucrats. They fly in, land, then fly out. It's like
So, I'm curious, as an Indigenous person in academia, how do you navigate some of those, the resentment in our community, rightly so, about Western research, Western knowledge systems regulating Indigenous,
good question.
How do you navigate that yourself?
Look, I know very little Aboriginal language, but I swear in it quite a lot. So I'm always in trouble.
Right.
I'm always in trouble, yes. And however, there are good colleagues there. I do work with some good people, good humanists. I think we need to have a
explain what you mean by that?
Embracing cultures, and people, not looking at these notions of can we prove brownie points by doing this and that, and looking at people as people. We all come with the same. People have, come from countries that did have Indigenous people there once, Aboriginal people in their countries. All their knowledge is built up from their Aboriginal people, and eventually they've killed them out or assimilated them within their cultural group, and they've forgotten about them. And they come still with that built into their DNA. And here we're still strong. We've been told we've been dying for over 100 odd years. We're still here. The country still speaks to us. Just on the weekend I was out at my place out at kuril, where they've put up all these gas mines on. By the way, I'm anti-mining, anti-archaeology.
What have thought?
A lot of things I'm anti about, but still. And Willie Wagtail was following me around and humbugging me all day. He was telling me something. So, this country speaks to us, and I know a lot of non-Indigenous people that have been on the land, for probably for 100 years, and they've been imbued with the same spirituality of the country. So, we have a shared history in this place, and I think we need to come together and talk about that shared history and understand that those old protection policies that actually forbid non-Indigenous people to help Aboriginal people, and there were people that broke the law to do it. So that's where I come from with my work and the way I see the world. My grandfather, Charlie Leon, was in 1920s, took a group of Aboriginal dancers, performers around New South Wales, and every place that he stopped at, every hospital, he donated money, and we talk about reconciliation. He was this black fella giving money to white fellas, the poor white fellas, and yet he would have been poor himself, same with the dance troupe. He'd become chair of the Aboriginal Advancement League in 1958. Mungo Mountain he's a signatory to, as a sacred site, first sacred site in Australia. So there, we have people that have actually made change the way other people see us. And by the way, his patron at the time was Errol Flynn. And look, Uncle Lenny looks like Errol. Another story, sorry. Get me in trouble that way.
I'm quite curious about your mob in terms of the science community when Mungo Lady was returned. Was there resistance in the community around, scientific community around that? And can you tell us about what went on there?
Look, there's been resistance from various people if you're on our side. Don't really like to see it as that, but there were some people. Look, when Jim Burke first went into the Melbourne University,
Amazing man.
And he went up to the VC's office and he said, I can't say the words here, but in effect it was
good Aboriginal English.
Give me my ancestors back. And it took off from there. From that time, there was, I suppose the anthropologist is a big label really, but some anthropologists said, you can't give these remains back. You are giving away scientific data. And I don't know how they could say that. I know why they said it, but I don't know how they could say it, because they just didn't see both sides. And it drove a wedge between them and us, because someone said, well, in the end it is their remains. You can't get away from that. And so, but then they went to the papers, these people, and they said, we want headlines saying, that you're giving away history, you're giving away science. And then they wrote to overseas anthropologists, American anthropologists, and they came. Of course, all the time, Jim Berg and other people just digging their heels. This really fed their fire for them. And so, it was And people said, you can't bring American ancestral into this. This is Australia. This is our problems. We'll sort them out. And so it did divide out, and that division is actually probably still there with some people.
Debates still rage today over who owns Aboriginal heritage and their right to study us. And regardless of how old remains are, 42,000 years, that's still grandmother to someone. And that's what people need to remember. The remains we brought back from Vienna that we repatriated to Strait, Steve assisted us with that. As far as she'd been gone for 150 years overseas, travelled more than all of us. But when she came back, that was still grandmother. And that's the point that a lot of people miss. But people are slowly learning.
See, I mean, you're situated in the Queensland Museum, and you're the unit that facilitates the return of ancestral remains and secret sacred objects. Can you tell us about your work in terms of navigating between community and the institution, and where are your energies placed? Where is the fight placed? Can you tell us about what's
My
happening?
boss is here.
You can be honest.
Where? Who is it?
Talk to it. Oh no, up there.
Up there?
You and Tracy got the same hair. Sorry.
Tell us all about her.
All right. First up, I just want to acknowledge my mate Liz. Put your hand up, Liz. She comes and volunteers for me to work with the remains. She gives me Chantel's come from the museum in Scotland, from the old country, very supportive. So, however, Queensland Museum's always been repatriating before it was legislated. So it's legislated now that museums return ancestral remains and secret sacred objects to communities. Some very forward-thinking people there, although some problems, but it's getting better. People are learning. Steve's always been involved with us in returning remains. People like Bob Weatherall who stand on the footsteps on the steps of museums and have silent protests and tell people to give us back our ancestors and our grandmothers and grandfathers. And Jim Berg, Koori Heritage Trust, I believe he was with.
Yep.
Those people that who won't back down from it. So my work involves talking to communities, telling them who we have there of their ancestors, and really trying to impress upon them that these are their family members, that we can help you get them home.
A lot of those remains that are going back, people, some anthropologists might not like it, but most of those remains, or a lot of those remains, were actually stolen about 5 minutes after people died, which they wasn't shot for. And also, the graves were robbed, literally, before people would, almost call in their grave. So there's a lot of atrocities done in that way, and that's where a lot of the remains, particularly the overseas remains, we have people over here from Sweden and Germany. One fellow called Murberg from Sweden actually followed an Aboriginal person around that was dying up in the Kimberley. And he followed him around, because he thought he's going to die any minute and have his body. In actual fact, the local people got onto this, and this person died in peace somewhere else, and he didn't get the body. Mind you, he was so low, this Murberg, that even his people who were working with him, the white fellows who were working with him, disowned him in the end. But those remains have come back, and the Tasmanian remains have come back. Remains of named people, and a lot of the people, some of the people anyway, that have gone abroad were named, and they're coming back, and they've come back. So this is, in my view, reconciliation. This is what this is a little bit we can put together as reconciliation. Certainly So that's one of the reasons why I'm involved with it. Because these things were done. I mean, it's all right saying it might have been done in the name of anthropology, but it was anthropology 150 years ago. I mean, you know, it's not today at all. Nobody would condone any of this sort of behaviour at all, but and quite rightly. But this was done by people, and you've got to see museums. In those days, museums were stamp collectors. You know, if somebody was going abroad, they could go to the museum and say, "Look, I'm going to go to so and so and so and so." And the museum would say, "We haven't got a body from there, or we haven't got a skull from there. So if you see any, bring them back to us." And they did. And they thought, some of them, this is the best you can think of these people, but some of them thought they were helping science. The irony is that most of these remains that have come back from Europe, particularly, and America, have never been studied since.
A few years ago I read a book called Run the Black Cockatoo, which was anyone familiar with that book? I think wrote it, and it was about his discovery of an Aboriginal skull on the, you know, the
Family had an Aboriginal skull sitting on the fireplace here.
And I'm curious about the you know, these private collectors or just private households who thought it was their right to acquire Aboriginal bodies and remains alongside the Aboriginal land that they sat on. I'm curious to the extent to which that, I mean...
I repatriated a skull that actually had wax on its head. So someone was doing, and it was from Beenleigh, and these people were actually doing some sort of devil worshipping with it. You know, it's the thought. Other people had remains in their pool hall, in their pool room. You know, so people were picking them up out of rock faces, burial areas, and hiding them away in their collections somewhere. And this is true. And it doesn't matter how much people would like to deny it. We talk about reconciliation. There's been no truth in part of reconciliation in this country. So there's another buzzword that we need to move on from. And I apologise about that, but it's one of these things that everyone's got a reconciliation statement with no doing words in it, or truth words in part of it. And so, you know, here we have Mudwingi down there, the mob down there, where Bahami stepped off this earth after he created it. The mobs went there, the non-Indigenous people went and chiselled up the hieroglyphics from there, put them in the foyer area of Parks and Wildlife in New South Wales. All the graziers around there made coffee tables out of this heritage work. You know, Aboriginal cultural property, things that would tell us about the past. And so, you know, we had these collectors that just collected them for whatever reason. But, you know, there's lots of that.
Yeah, I'm sure we have, you know, there are legislation in place for institutions to repatriate remains, but I'm wondering about the remains that sit in households today still that have not been returned.
Well, if you can catch them, there are penalties. But
It's against the law to have human remains unless you are a scientific organisation or a hospital. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yep, that's the law.
Have you had many projects
Institutions.
returning remains to the Queensland Museum, or saying, hey, we've got
people who anonymously leave them at the front desk, which is quite a surprise for some of the BSOs. Or when people approach us about purchasing artefacts that they may have to sell, we go and inspect, and they were saying we also had this box of bones. So that's happened a few times as well. I believe people are learning and attitudes are changing, and they don't really want to collect us as curios anymore. I'm hopeful.
Now, I'm conscious of time, we've been having sort of yarn. I'm just wondering, does anyone here want to join this conversation, ask a question or comment? Yes, at the back.
I have one question, and I agree with you three on the set of your beliefs. The gentleman on the end, you were talking about the difference in the skulls. You didn't sort of say why. Do you think it was a different people?
The grey soul and the robust.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a long story. You want me to start?
explain what Homo sapiens sapien means? That's
Yeah.
probably where you get started.
Yeah, well, the Homo sapiens are us, everybody in this audience and stage and everywhere around you, and if you walk outside, that's us. And up to about 40,000 years ago, there were other people around out in Southeast Asia and elsewhere that we've now classed as different than us. I mean, one of them we all know is Neanderthals, which were in Europe and the Middle East. And when we see a large, robust sort of skull like that, you sort of think, well, do they have the genes of perhaps one of these people that later went extinct? And so, but that's something we can't work out because we can't date that individual anyway. But there are others. But what we could do now, and what we couldn't do in the past, and one of this is one of the arguments that science put up 30 years ago, that, you know, to have these remains, even if you have them locked away, you can improve, you have improved methods to find out more and more as you go on. And of course, we've now come into the genetics age, and they're finding that they can extract genetic DNA and mitochondrial DNA from bone. And so that, if that was carried out, we might go somewhere, or there might not be any in there to look at. But it's a way forward. We could now, they've sequenced the Neanderthal DNA, the genome, they've sequenced a group called Denisovans from Siberia, who were a group which went extinct, and they've sequenced that as well. So now that you can see the differences in the different people. So that's, you know, that might be one way to go to do it, but we won't be able to do that because it's not available to do that with. But what we're trying to find out, see what we've got is two groups, we've got, even on this stage, we've got two arguments. We've got a traditional argument about the past and the knowledge from the past. And we've got a scientific approach about knowledge from the past. Now, it would be nice if we could come together on those two things.
How do you navigate when you say Western scientific knowledge refutes, contests, denies Indigenous knowledge systems?
Well, I don't
Indigenous
know an example of that. We don't go out to say you're wrong, your dreaming's wrong, this is wrong, that's wrong. We just say this is what we found. How does it
And
match?
so we say you're wrong.
You can, and creationists say that all the time to us.
I mean, there's an
We
interesting...
don't take any notice of it, but it's we just keep going. But that's it. Now, I wouldn't sit here and say, well, you know, the dream is wrong, or these stories are, you know. This is a piece of people's beliefs, and you have to respect those people's beliefs. And I'm a scientist, so I understand what I understand about the past as well.
And I guess I'm curious...
I think we're big enough to actually live together on that level.
I remember I had a lecture, we have like an Aboriginal 101 course at our university, which, you know, the university does have. 101, introduction to Indigenous people, something like that. And we had an archaeologist and an anthropologist both present their own narratives about how Aboriginal people came to be in this land. And what was interesting, they both had similar stories. So the anthropologist told the story of some Central Desert mob of their creation stories, and the archaeologist told an archaeologist version of how people came to be, and talked about critters coming from here and travelling all over the... You know, so it was interesting language for me to listen to. Both accounts included megafauna, which was quite interesting. But what was fascinating was that the archaeologist's version of events was seen as fact, and the students received it as fact. And when they reflected on the lecture, this was the fact, and the Aboriginal narrative was a mythology. And that was how many of our non-Indigenous students engaged with the presenters when they reflected on it. What was interesting when you look at what the evidence was used, there was this, we were shown a dig site, it was a square, you know, and there was a whole lot of invented narrative that went around some of this stuff that I found really interesting, because you have to join dots and people have to hypothesise about maybe this is what it means, but we don't actually know that, but sometimes Western science proclaims to know without necessarily evidence. But what was interesting was that if we look at what passes as evidence over the years, oftentimes Western science revises the story. There are new discoveries and changes. Yet the oral narratives of Indigenous people have remained unchanged. Some would argue and go, that's actually been the most consistent story. So wouldn't we go with a more consistent one?
I want to engage the audience here. Look, who's Prometheus? I had an argument with my son over this. Who's Prometheus? It's that ship that flies around in Stargate, isn't it? Prometheus. Yeah, that's it. Sorry, I get it wrong all the time. Who's Prometheus? Now this is, yeah, please.
I think it's Greek mythology. He took fire from the sun to give to the people.
Brought the fire to the humans.
And then was punished for it.
Now, here's a dreaming story from Greece. You know, it's part of their mythology. It's a bit like ours. You know, so again, I had the argument with my son, and he said, no, it's this person that stole fire from the gods and gave it to humans, and he was punished for it. It's a bit like ours. You know, we have these stories about how things are and why, and also rules and, you know, all those type of things. We even have stories about when the first volcano erupted here. You know, and how long ago was that? The first volcano, you know, last time the volcano erupted.
The last one was in Western Victoria, or around that area, or in Central Victoria. I think that was about 6,000 years ago.
So, you know, we still have those alive today. And there have been non-Indigenous people have recorded those, so we know that they're there too, as well as our elders passing them on. So that's, I was just trying to engage the audience in that story that you were saying about all these evidences. You know, and again, I'd like you to take away from here, we colonise the world, so everyone that's come here is just coming back.
Now, I'm conscious of time. Do we have any more questions or comments? I'm sorry.
Hello, everybody. My name is Susan. I'm not an expert on anything, but just really listening to, sorry, I'm forgetting names, Steve on the right. Just as you were last speaking about the scientific knowledge and presenting that in such a way that the words that were being used was about the modern knowledge of science and the traditional older past knowledge, and these kinds of ways of speaking about Western ways of understanding the world, I think, are problematic. That the Western way of seeing the world is too simplistic to take on and to understand the Aboriginal ways, the stories, the wisdom, the deep wisdom that's there. And maybe just the Western science is too simplistic, actually.
Yeah, I agree.
So, really, with respect, and it's fascinating to see what you shared. And in my Western education, I'm sitting watching it, and it's so fascinating. But now, listening to the other speakers and their responses, of course, there's a much deeper way of understanding the world, and I think we're not getting it somehow. So I just wanted to think that.
Thank you. I'll take this one. I'll just move to the front, if that's okay.
Is it on?
Yes, thanks.
question time, but I'm
Don't
interested.
start with that
I'm interested in knowing whether the desire for repatriation goes beyond the remains of people and the sacred objects. Is there another sense in which Aboriginal people desire to have repatriation of other artefacts and other things that are not necessarily sacred?
Do you mean general artefacts?
Yeah, like knives and...
Yes.
Can we also add
We
land?
want it all back.
Say land?
But we're willing to share and learn. Can I just say, when I was at school, which, okay, it was a long time ago, we learned that Aboriginal people had been in Australia for about 3,000 years. So how could we say that it was our country? And that we came over on this damn land bridge that nobody really can explain. Now, it's been put back further and further that we have been here. And I have no doubt that one day they'll say, look, I think we've been here for about 2 million years. And it really is the cradle of mankind. And humanity did start in Australia and everybody went out and populated the rest of the world. So I find it fascinating. So that's my dilemma. These remains have to be returned and buried, but I still want to know this stuff. And that's something that our communities are working through as well. Is yes, we want our stuff back, but yes, we are willing to share because, as one old elder said to my brother who was traumatised by white people, and he said, "Uncle, what are we going to do about these white people?" And the old uncle, who's since passed, said, "They're the new Aborigines, and we've got to teach them how to live in our country." And that's what I believe, is that we can get on, and everyone's new Aborigines.
So Andrew Bolt was right.
He is okay, second cousin.
Your uncle.
You know, there are a couple of sides to this, that question. You know, we do, and I've seen material given back to our mob, and it's important cultural artefact, to use that word, where, you know, like we had message sticks, and today it's almost impossible to be able to decipher those message sticks. We're able to pull apart the Egyptian hieroglyphics and things like that, but when we come to Aboriginal writing, because everyone thinks Aboriginal people didn't have a writing, but a way of communicating is by pictures, isn't it? You know? And symbols. You know, we have a big smiley face that everyone knows. And so if you're able to read Aboriginal art, it tells a story. And so do these things that have been imbued with knowledge. And I've seen material destroyed by everybody. You know? And so I have a real concern at times about where these things go to. And I've been part with Bob Weatherall for a long time, calling up for a cultural place, cultural keeping places, so that we can house these and the mobs can come in and learn from the things as well, or not reinvent knowledge, but, you know, input into that knowledge that we have. It's a bit like our languages. We know we had over 250 languages. I think there's about 50 left today. 30 of those are endangered. You know? It's a bit like our animals here. We put a protection order over it, they become extinct. Get them all into the bloody zoos, into the pet stores, let everybody have them as pets. We won't have rabbits, we won't have rats, and we won't have all these other cats and things. Do you people have cats?
Yeah, like cats.
Give me one, I'll eat it. Yeah, that's the point.
Thank you. Question in the front. Do we have any more before we wrap up? So, and then we'll come to.
Sorry, yeah, I think we're running out of time, but I've had I don't know, I've seen some sort of conspiracy thing happening online recently, but I think it's been going on for some time, but just some information arising about an ancient treaty that was formed with some two Egyptian brothers that arrived on the east coast and down in New South Wales, and there was some hieroglyphs, actually, like Egyptian hieroglyphs carved into the stone, and I was just wondering what your opinion about that is. Is it? I know that there's some online things saying they're real, some that they are fake, but yeah, I don't know if you guys know about that, but I just saw some stuff online.
Can't talk about that. I just know that the Chinese actually come here. So again, it's questionable. But when they talk about the Great Chinese Armada, and he circumnavigated the world before Christopher Columbus or whoever those guys were. So again, knowledge is changing all the time. We've seen rock art. People have come and put their initials in rock art, and they go, "Look at this great traditional art." Again, it's questionable things. However, the mobs would know.
I don't know anything about it.
No.
Those works were dated the early 1900s. They were carved recently.
Yeah, there you go.
Can I take a question, please?
I'm just wondering if there's, is there a kind of a space in between, or a space where your culture and the archaeology and that can work together? I know it's not anywhere near a similar culture, but I know they have traitures in like New Orleans, which are Creole and Native American, and their whole thing is a mix of faith, a mix of their cultural medicine, but it's also very tied into conventional medicine, and that's for that. Could there be something similar in this, or is it very much that, as you've been saying, these stories haven't changed, these stories are as you know them to be, and that there's not really that room for partnership?
Can I just, two of my brothers are archaeologists. I killed one of them, I said that. However, I think we all have to live together as humans, and that's part of our growing, is finding common ground. And these conversations are starting. Previously, you would not have had 3 Aboriginal people sitting on stage with Professor, and now we can. I mean, you'd never have the white fellas outnumbered on the stage. That's what I thought when I saw the program. Yes, it can happen, and it's changing. Things are changing. We're growing as people. 100 years ago, children were working in factories. They were robbing their own graves in England for medical science, for whatever. Look how far we've come.
Don't
We can
forget
have
how
an
women were
audience.
treated.
Sorry?
Throw women in there too, how women were treated.
Yeah. All those things that we know historically. And now we can sit down and have this discussion to try and work out ways that we can work together for humanity.
And I mean, I have to declare, there's a couple of us that were blackfellas, but working in, universities, which it's not that I wouldn't say I'm against Western research. I'm engaged in that system and those processes, so I can't say, well, I'm anti-research by any means. What I am questioning as an Indigenous person is the regulation of Indigenous knowledge by Western research, is the operation of Western research as an apparatus of colonial control. That's what many of us are resisting against and going, hang on, that's not objective, neutral fact. These myths have been created by Western research to exercise dominance over us, to acquire our land. So it's questioning how research has been used to oppress us and our knowledge and our wisdom. So I wouldn't, I work as a researcher, and I know I have to be accountable to community, to my mob, about what I say and when I take people's stories and what I do with it, how I handle it. I'm very conscious of the political position that I sit within between my community and Western research processes, and it's something that I grapple with every day, I have to say.
Yeah, Chelsea, I think we're getting, we're getting to a point now where, look, I've been researching the Boer War guys, the black trackers that went to the Boer War since I don't know how long, since Mr. Bonner sat me down and told me the story about 4 trackers from Palm Island. And look, I got a big touch up by historians all over the place saying, Aboriginal men never went. Well, look, I found 14 men that signed up to win. I haven't found the trackers yet. However, I'll still be on that trail. But what I've been able to do is, find Aboriginal men in unmarked graves that have gone to war. They're in paupers' graves, and we've been able to go and put headstones and plaques on their graves. And look, what it does when the whole community turns out, white, black, yellow fellas, all different peoples, turn out to pay respect to one person. You know? I think we're getting time to decolonisation. We've moved on from reconciliation. You know, it's great. Reconciliation is great, don't get me wrong. But I think we need to now start moving on as Australians and start embracing this notion of there was a past here, there is a black history, and as well, you know, we need to find those people and bring them back to life because they're sitting with all of us.
One last question.
One last one, thank you. If I could just get a quick grab from each panellist, in terms of your own organisations, do you feel there's a robust conversation going on in academia and the museum and like around intellectual property? Because I think that's the big thing that is
Intellectual property?
Intellectual property.
What's that?
Thank you. Thanks, Al. Steve and Chelsea and Leonie really love. It's a conversation that is just, it's deafening.
Hey, everything's for sale. We live in a capitalist world.
And I think, and that's probably to open up another big conversation, but I'd be really interested just to hear what you all think about the institutions that you currently work in and whether or not there's a good conversation going on around intellectual property in this country.
Lots of conversation. They're still learning about us. It's unfortunate that we just can't go to work and do our jobs. As every Aboriginal person knows, you go and you do your job and the kitchen sink, as we say it. They're still learning about us and we have to teach them.
No, they've got to save us. Sorry.
No.
Save us. I'm being cheeky, so stop it.
Save us from what? Oh, I don't need saving. I know where I'm going. So there are really good conversations happening, and some people are quite enlightened by what we have to say. They're willing to learn our protocols and traditions. And every culture has people who won't listen. We have an advisory committee at Queensland Museum who also assist in getting people to hear us and assist in those conversations as well. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess so, Leonie, from the issue, I'll give language as an example. It's a real bugbear of mine. You're a professor or an academic that goes out, records the stories and records the language, and then you somehow own that. And the Aboriginal people don't own their language anymore. So you'll go and produce a dictionary, and you get the kudos and you get all the acknowledgement. And you might mention one or two other Aboriginal people that have helped you, but you don't own that language. And that's the stuff that I think I really struggle with around all the research and the science and everything else that goes on, is that as soon as we give a story over, someone produces a book, someone produces something.
That's an issue we've
I
had.
think is...
My brothers and my uncle, who's now passed, contributed a chapter to one of the publications at the museum. And as far as we're concerned, the museum doesn't know that. I don't even give a rat's what they say. That's my uncle told us those stories, and we made that quite clear to them, and they're okay with it. So anyone that wants to, and they've acknowledged us in that publication, and anyone that wants to use what we've put in there, they have to seek permission from us, and they're told that.
I think we're getting close to the time where now our narratives and our voices starting to come through things. You know, and as of yet, we still haven't. Australia, as a main in academia, hasn't found a way of actually referencing our work. You know, even though they'll put in Nell from blah blah and all this sort of stuff, but we're coming to a point where now we're starting to find a way between it, and with more of us there doing it, and same with you guys out there, it's changing. It's changing, and we're starting to have a real conversation with Australians, and it needs to be a protracted one as well, because there's been a lot of hurt done in the past, and we're still doing it, and we're doing it to ourselves as well.
Can I say thank you, Di, for opening up a new line of questioning when we're over time. Can I just wrap it up by saying, from my perspective, I think there needs to be greater
greater Indigenous governance over research more broadly. And unfortunately, it's still very siloed, so we have sort of ethical guidelines for doing health, research in health, and HMRC tell us how we should do research in Indigenous communities, and it's quite fragmented. And I think
even the ethics.
Yeah, I mean, we actually, and non-Indigenous people are on the ethics committees judging whether or not it's appropriate. So we need to have governance. You know, this is a bigger discussion around sovereignty of land, of bodies, of knowledge, that this is bigger than just how we own our ancestral remains. But we can continue that conversation into the foyer. I just want to see if we can just finish up in terms of, we're talking here about unfinished business for all our ancestors. I'm just wondering for each of you personally, what is your unfinished business in this area? What is it that you would like to see happen in your lifetime, in the work that you're doing, or what it is that you want to you'd like to see? So I'm just wondering who wants to.
Questions? My aim is to do myself out of a job. I want to send home the remains of every person that we have at Queensland Museum. Unfortunately, no. I want to retire soon. But before I retire, I want everyone home. And there's a little piece of skull sitting on a shelf. I don't know how we're going to get him home, but I'm determined that that person will go home. That's all. Thank you.
That's a good question, and I don't think there's an answer to that from myself. There's a mountain to be climbed, and it's not getting there, it's the climb. And we've got a long way to go still. We're told we're given land rights and native title, and yet even our own mob can't appreciate what those old people did in the past to get us to this point. And so there's a lot of work to be done on both sides of the fence, and I'm about pulling down those fences and bringing people together. I ride 1100 Yamaha and I love it, and won't ever take that off me. And so I guess in saying that, we're people here in this country, and we need to be able to come together and respect the place. We've got things happening, we've got weather change happening, and we've got extinctions of species all over the place, and no one's listening to our voice in amongst this. We're caught up in this whole commercialism, capitalist world that we live in, that we've got to own that 1100, and we've got to create all these jobs to dig out Mother Earth, and we've got to employ Aboriginal people to give the authority to dig that up, to destroy those cultural sites. So we've got a long way to go as a people, as Australians. I think when I die, I'd like to be known as the one that sat there and thought. I guess that's it.
I reckon you did more than sat there and thought. Steve, what is your unfinished business? Oh, and what are the questions you'd love to have answered in terms of some of your work?
I'm sort of, when you get old, it's almost past my bedtime. I've got a fan at large. And no, I don't know. I can't answer it. I can't answer the unfinished business. I'll keep helping Leonie and the repatriation as much as I can in the future. And I hope somebody else takes up something similar when us old elders go, or please retire. And look, it's doing little bits, little baby steps. Go one at a time, bit by bit. And you said about the mountain, yeah, well, you can get up a mountain with baby steps. One by one, you'll get there. And I think that's the climb. I think it is a long haul. You've got places like France that still dig in and say, well, whatever we've collected in the past is French. That's it, that's what the law says. So they're not interested in talking about repatriation because it's French. And it's the same, it has been difficult with Germany. They've melted a bit. And of course Britain's melted a bit as well. They look like that too. But it would be nice to see some other countries appreciate what we're trying to do. And the history Their trouble is they don't have Indigenous people anymore, and they don't have those traditions. They don't deal with anybody else except themselves, so they can't see into any of the issues that we have here. So, and what we're trying to do and what we're trying to get over. So I just hope that happens as well. They unfreeze. Look, we had some remains going back from Poland. 105. I got them already, went to this place in Poland, Wrocław University, got them already listed, I've got all the reports and everything. And everybody said, yep, they can go back, they can go back. They even advised them out of boxes and everything. 6 months later, I asked, what's happened to the Polish remains? Our government won't send them back now. This is the government of a country that's been raped so many times. It had concentration camps on its grounds. You'd think these people would understand. And sometimes I think if they don't understand, the French are in a much better light than I thought they were.
We've still got a long way to go to learn to live together as humans.
Yeah. But so if it's up to me, all these places will unfreeze and they'll come back.
Can I just invite you to thank each of our panellists for sharing their knowledge, wisdom and expertise tonight for this discussion.